On to chapter 24. I just want to get it so it's nice and big. Okay. Chapter 24, Damien. Damien had hazel eyes with a little black dot in the middle of each of them. The dots were called pupils. So was Damien. He was a pupil in Mrs. Jewls' class. Mrs. Jewls was about to show the class a movie. She turned out the lights. When it was dark, Damien's pupils got bigger. Damien, said Mrs. Jewls, ran downstairs and asked Louis if he'd like to see the movie with us. Damien ran down the 30 flights of stairs to the playground. He stepped outside as Louis was hooking up a tetherball. Hey, Louis, Damien called. Do you want to see a movie in Mrs. Jewls' class? Louis rubbed his chin. What movie? He asked. Damien shrugged his shoulders. I don't know, he said. I'll be right back. Damien ran all the way back up to the stairs on the 30th story. Louis wants to know what movie, said Damien. Does he want to know the name of the movie or what the movie is about? Asked Mrs. Jewls. I don't know, asked Damien. I'll ask him. Damien raced down the stairs, out to the playground. Louis, do you want to know the name of the movie or what the movie is about? He asked. The name, said Louis. Okay, said Damien. Damien hurried back up the 30 flight of stairs. He took the steps 2 at a time. He wants to know the name, said Damien. Turtles, said Mrs. Jewls. Damien turned around, took a deep breath, then ran back down the stairs. Turtles, Damien told Louis. Hey, that might be good, said Louis. What's it about? I'm not sure, said Damien. I'll find out. Damien raced back up the stairs, but first he stopped to take a drink of water. What's it about, Mrs. Jewls? Asked Damien. Turtles, said Mrs. Jewls. Damien rushed back down the stairs to tell Louis. Turtles, said Damien. No thanks, said Louis. I don't like turtles. They are too slow. Damien lowered his head and slowly walked up the 30 flights of stairs. His legs were sore, he could hardly breathe, and his side ached. By the time he got up to Mrs. Jewls' class, the movie was over. All right, class, said Mrs. Jewls. I want everybody to take out a piece of paper and a pencil and write something about turtles. Damien had missed the whole movie, but he could still have written something about turtles. Turtles are too slow. But now he couldn't find his pencil. It just wasn't his day. What's the matter, Damien? Asked Mrs. Jewls. I can't find my pencil, said Damien. Class, Damien's pencil is missing, Mrs. Jewls announced. What did it look like, Damien? She asked. It was long and yellow, said Damien. It had a black point at one end and a red eraser on the other. I found it, said Todd, here by the blackboard. Yes, that's it, said Damien. No, there it is, in the corner by the wastebasket, said Crabapple. Maybe that's it, said Damien. Here it is, said John. It's been in my desk the whole time. No, here it is in my hand, said Joe. I found it, said Rondi. Here it is, said Allison. I have it, laughed DJ. I found it, said Myron. Which one is yours, Damien? Asked Mrs. Jewls. Damien studied each pencil. They all look like mine, he said. Fortunately, at that moment, Louis walked into the classroom. He handed Damien a pencil. You dropped this when you were telling me about the movie, said Louis. Thanks, said Damien. Okay, class, said Mrs. Jewls, so that we have no more mix-ups, I want everybody to write his name on his pencil. Damien spent the rest of the day trying to write his name on his pencil. Damien's pencil couldn't write on itself. It was just like his beautiful hazel eyes with the black dots in the middle. They could see everything except themselves. Chapter 25, Jenny. Jenny came to school on the back of her father's motorcycle. She was late. Wayside School began at 9 o'clock. It was almost 9:30. She kissed her father goodbye and raced up the 30 flights of stairs to Mrs. Jewls' room. I'm sorry I'm late, Mrs. Jewls, but my father's motorcycle lost a... There was nobody there. The room was empty. There was no one in the room. Maybe I'm early, Jenny thought. She looked up at the clock. It was exactly 9:30. Oh, I hope they didn't go on a field trip without me. She looked out the window. Nobody was there, not even Louis. Jenny didn't know what to do. She sat down at her desk. She watched the second hand go around on the clock. I might as well catch up on my spelling, she thought. She opened her desk and took out her speller. M-U-D spells mud. Where's everybody? B-L-O-O-D spells blood. I hope nothing happened to them. B-L-A-C-K spells black. Jenny heard footsteps coming down the hall. She began to work very fast. H-A-C spells hack. S-M-A-C-K spells smack. Someone opened the door. Jenny turned around. Hack, she gasped. He was a man Jenny had never seen before. He had a black mustache and a matching attaché case. Jenny jumped out of her seat. Get back in your seat, the man said. Jenny slowly sat down. The man walked over and sat down in Dana's seat, facing Jenny. He opened the attaché case and removed some papers. What is your name? He asked her. Jenny, Jenny whispered. Jenny? The man repeated as if he didn't believe her. Well, it's actually Jennifer. Jenny for short, said Jenny. I see, said the man. He took the speller from Jenny's desk. Jenny's name was written across the top. He put the speller in his case. What are you doing here, Jennifer? He asked. This is my classroom, said Jenny. Are you sure? The man asked. Yes, I think so. I mean, where's the rest of your class? The man asked. I don't know, said Jenny. Maybe they went on a field trip. No, said the man. They didn't go on a field trip. I don't know where they are, Jenny cried. I was half an hour late today, and when I got here, everybody was gone. Really? Did something happen to them? The man didn't answer her. He wrote something on a piece of paper. Tell me something, Jennifer. When you came to school today and saw that nobody was here, weren't you somewhat puzzled? Yes, said Jenny. What happened to them? If you were really so concerned and so puzzled, said the man, why did you work on spelling? I don't know, said Jenny. It would seem to me, the man said, that if a child came to school and nobody was there, she might play games or walk around or go home, but certainly not work on spelling. Jenny started to cry. I didn't know what to do. I was late and I had to ride on a motorcycle and nobody was here, and now you're asking me all kinds of questions, and I'm afraid that of what has happened to Dana and Mrs. Jules and Rondi and Allison. The man didn't understand a word she said. Jenny heard more footsteps. The man got up and opened the door. 2 more men came in. One had a black mustache like the first man. The other man was bald. Jenny was frightened of them. Does she know? Asked the newcomer with the mustache. She claims to know nothing, the man answered. She says she was late today, and when she got here, everybody was gone. Do you believe her? Asked the man with the bald head. I'm not sure. She was working on her speller when I walked in. He reached into his attaché case and took out Jenny's speller. He handed it to the man with the bald head. The bald man read Jenny's name across the top of it. Tell me, Jenny, he said, why are you the only one here? I don't know, said Jenny. Has this ever happened before? He asked. No, never, said Jenny. He gave Jenny her speller. Put this inside your desk. Jenny put it away. I'm satisfied, said the man with the bald head. Okay, Jennifer, said the first man. You may go now. Jenny got out of her seat. Jenny, the bald man called. Jenny turned slowly around. Yes, she whispered. Next time, don't come to school on a Saturday. Chapter 26. Terrence. Terrence was a good athlete, but a bad sport. Rondi and Allison were playing 2-square with a red ball. Can I play? Asked Terrence. No, Allison replied. You have to let me play, Terrence said. Lewis says we have to share the balls. Well, we're not sharing with you, said Allison. Oh, let him play, said Rondi. All right, said Allison. We'll play a 3-square. You better play right. I will, said Terrence. Allison bounced the ball to Rondi. Rondi bounced it over to Terrence. Terrence caught it and kicked it over the fence. You guys have to go get it, said Allison. Shut up, Dixie Cup, Terrence answered. Rondi ran and told Lewis. DJ and Damien were playing basketball. Uh-oh, here comes Terrence, said Damien. Hey, let me play, said Terrence. Get lost, Terrence, said Damien. You have to share the balls. Lewis says so, said Terrence. Okay, but just throw it in the basket. Don't kick it, said Damien. I won't, said Terrence. First, Damien took a shot. It bounced off the backboard and through the hoop. Next, DJ took a shot. He threw it underhand, way up in the air. It came down through the hoop without touching the rim. Then Terrence took a shot. He kicked it over the fence. You idiot, said Damien. Take a train, peanut brain, Terrence answered. DJ went and told Louis. Stephen, Calvin, Joe, John, and Leslie were playing Spud. Stephen was it. Everyone else had a number. Stephen had to throw the ball up in the air and call out a number. The person who had that number had to try and catch it. Can I play? Asked Terrence. No, said Calvin. You'll just kick the ball over the fence. No, said Joe. No way, said John. No, said Leslie. Sure, said Stephen. Newcomers are it. He gave the ball to Terrence. Just throw the ball up in the air and call it a number between 1 and 5. Okay, said Terrence. The children formed a circle around Terrence. 1,000,000, yelled Terrence as he kicked the ball over the fence. What did you do that for? Asked Stephen. Eat a frog, warthog, said Terrence. Stephen ran and told Louis. Terrence looked around. There was nothing to do. There were no balls left. Louis walked up to him. He was followed by Allison, Rondi, Damien, DJ, Stephen, Calvin, Joe, John, and Leslie. What's the matter, Terrence? Asked Louis. There are no balls, said Terrence. Do you have a green ball? No, said Louis. All of my balls have mysteriously disappeared. Darn it, said Terrence. There's nothing left to kick. Nothing left to kick? Asked Louis. Oh, I don't know about that. What do you think, Rondi? Is there anything left to kick? Rondi thought a minute. Then she smiled. She was missing her 2 front teeth. Yep, there is something left to kick, she said. Well, where is it? Said Terrence. Let me check with Allison, said Louis. Allison, is there anything left to kick? He winked at her. There sure is, said Allison. What? Asked Terrence. How about you, Damien? Asked Louis. Can you think of anything? Damien nodded his head yes. Well, what is it? Asked Terrence. He couldn't wait. DJ, we got anything around here to kick? Asked Louis. DJ smiled. Yes, we do, he said. Give it to me, Terrence demanded. I don't know if I should, said Louis. What do you think, Calvin? Should I give it to him? I think you should, said Calvin. You heard Calvin, said Terrence. Give it to me. Not so fast, said Louis. Leslie, should I give it to him? Oh, yes, I think he deserves it, said Leslie. Give it to me, Terrence repeated. Do you also think he deserves it, Joe? Asked Louis. Yes, I think so, said Joe. What about you, John? Asked Louis. Definitely give it to him, John answered. Come on, said Terrence. Recess is almost over. We'll leave it up to Stephen, said Louis. Whatever he says goes. Let him have it, said Stephen. You heard him, Louis, said Terrence. Let me have it. Okay, said Louis. He picked Terrence up and kicked him over the fence. Chapter 27. Joy. Joy had forgotten her lunch at home. It was lunchtime. She was hungry. She didn't have a meal ticket. If she had had a meal ticket, she could have had lunch from Miss Mush, the lunch teacher. She'd have to be terribly hungry to eat a lunch made by Miss Mush. Even an empty brown paper bag sack would have tasted better. But that's how hungry Joy was. Damien hadn't forgotten his lunch. He had brought a lovely turkey sandwich, a big piece of chocolate cake, and a crisp red apple. All he needed was a glass of milk. He could get that from Miss Mush. Miss Mush didn't know how to brew milk. Damien left his lunch on his desk and went to the end of the milk line. Joy didn't waste any time. She reached into Damien's sack and took out the apple. But then she spotted the turkey sandwich. She put back the apple, took the sandwich, and noticed the chocolate cake. She put back the sandwich and took out the cake. But then Joy had second thoughts. She put back the cake. Then she grabbed Damien's whole lunch. First, she ate the sandwich. It was in a baggie. When she finished the sandwich, she placed the baggie on Jason's desk. Next, she ate the chocolate cake. It was wrapped in wax paper. She put the wax paper on Allison's desk. She ate the apple last. She placed the apple core on Dee Dee's desk. Then she put the empty sack on Calvin's desk. Damien returned with his glass of milk. Mrs. Jules, my lunch is gone, he called. I wonder where it could be, said Mrs. Jules. Calvin took it, said Joy. There's an empty sack on his desk. Good work, Joy, said Mrs. Jules. Calvin, I'm ashamed of you. She wrote Calvin's name on the blackboard under the word discipline. Look at the baggie from Damien's turkey sandwiches on Jason's desk, Joy called. Very good, Joy, said Mrs. Jules. But how did you know that Damien had a turkey sandwich? I'm just smart, said Joy. Mrs. Jewell wrote Jason's name on the blackboard under Calvin's. And there's the wax paper from the delicious chocolate cake on Allison's desk, Joy answered. Joy had chocolate all around her lips. Allison stood firm. She looked into Mrs. Jewell's eyes. I didn't eat his cake, she said. The evidence is there on your desk, said Mrs. Jewell's. Joy spotted it. She wrote Allison's name under Jason's. Damien's apple core is on Dee Dee's desk, said Joy. Very good, Joy, said Mrs. Jewell's. She wrote Dee Dee's name under Allison's. Damien, I think you ought to thank Joy, said Mrs. Jewell's. She solved the mystery. Thank you, Joy, said Damien. Just then, Louis, the art teacher, walked in. I have your lunch, Joy, he said. Your mother brought it. You left it at home. You mean you didn't have a lunch? Asked Mrs. Jewell's. You must be very hungry. No, said Joy, not really. Since Damien didn't get to eat, he can have it. Thanks a lot, said Damien. You are the greatest. He ate Joy's lunch, an old bologna sandwich and a dried-up carrot. Joy, for being such a good detective, thank you, and for being so generous with your lunch, you may help yourself to a Tootsie Roll Pop. Said Mrs. Jewell's. They are in the coffee can on top of my desk. Joy took one. Then when Mrs. Jewell's wasn't looking, she took another. Calvin, Jason, and Allison and Dee Dee had their names on the blackboard under the word discipline. But they were good the rest of the day, so at 2 o'clock, Mrs. Jewell's erased them. They forgot all about the whole thing. Damien had a lousy lunch instead of a great lunch, but 5 minutes later, it didn't make any difference. He couldn't taste it anymore, and he was full. He went outside to play basketball and forgot about the whole thing. Joy had a great lunch and 2 Tootsie Roll Pops. But 5 minutes later, it didn't make any difference. She couldn't take it anymore, and she was full. And at dinner time, she was hungry just the same. But a horrible thing happened. Joy couldn't forget about filching Damien's lunch. And for the rest of the year, every turkey sandwich, piece of chocolate cake, apple, and Tootsie Roll Pop tasted like Mrs. Mush's porridge. Okay, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to finish the book because we only have 2 chapters left, so I think we can finish it, okay? All right, chapter 28, Nancy. Nancy had big hands and big feet. He didn't like his name. He thought it was a girl's name. None of the other children in Mrs. Jewell's class thought that Nancy's name was odd. They didn't think of it as a girl's name or as a boy's name. Nancy was just the name of the quiet kid with the big hands and feet who sat over there in the corner next to John. Nancy was very quiet and shy. He was ashamed of his name. He had only one friend, a girl who went to class on the 23rd story of Wayside School. They were friends for a good reason. He didn't know her name, and she didn't know his name. They just called each other, "Hey, you," or just plain, "you." Nancy was afraid to ask his friend what her name was because then he might have to tell her his name. He never could figure out why she never asked, but he was happy just to leave well enough alone. One morning, Nancy and his friend were late. When they got to the 23rd story, his friend's teacher was waiting outside. "Hurry up, you're late, Mac," said the teacher. Nancy's friend turned red. She didn't move. "Come on, Mac, shake a leg, get the lead out," said the teacher. "Your name is Mac?" said Nancy. Mac was very pretty. She had red hair and freckles. She covered her face and ran into the room. "My name is Nancy," Nancy called after her. Mac stepped back outside. "I was ashamed to tell you my name," she said. "Me too," said Nancy. "Nancy's a girl's name." "Oh, I think it's cute," said Mac. "I like the name Mac," said Nancy. "Mac is a boy's name," said Mac. "My mother has a rich aunt named Nancy," said Nancy. "That's why she gave me the name." "My mother once had a dog named Mac," said Mac. "Hey, do you want to trade?" Nancy asked. "Can we?" asked Mac. "I don't see why not," said Nancy. "Okay," said Mac. They both spun around 100 times in opposite directions until they were so dizzy that they fell over. When they stood up, Mac was Nancy and Nancy was Mac. They said goodbye. Then Mac raced up to Mrs. Jewell's room. He was no longer shy. "Hi, everybody. My name's Mac," he announced. "I traded names." He held out his big hand. Todd jumped up and shook it. "Hi, Mac," he said. "Nice to meet you." "How you doing, Mac?" said Ron. "Howdy, Mac," said Terrence. "Nice to see you, Mac," said BB. "You traded names?" asked Jason. Jason didn't like his name either. That's right, Jason, old boy, said Mac. Is that allowed? Asked Jason. Why not? Said Mac. Hey, anybody want to trade? Jason called. I'll trade with you, said Terrence. He didn't like his name either. Wait, I'll trade with you, Terrence, said Mauricia. Mauricia didn't like her name. No, he's trading with me, said Jason. I'll trade with you, Mauricia, said Damien. No, thanks, said Mauricia. I'll trade with you, Damien, said Mrs. Jules. No, I want to be Mrs. Jules, said Stephen. It turned out that nobody in Mrs. Jules' class liked his name. The children all spun around in different directions until they got so dizzy they fell over. And when they stood up again, nobody knew who anybody was. What are we going to do, Mrs. Jules? Asked Leslie, who was really Eric Bacon. My name is not Mrs. Jules, it's Mauricia, answered Terrence, who was really Jason. It is not. I'm Mauricia, said Dee Dee, who was really Joe. You're both wrong, said Mauricia. I'm Mrs. Jules. This went on for an hour. At last they figured out who the real Rondi was. She was missing her 2 front teeth. And they figured out Rondi. After they figured out Rondi, they were able to get Allison pretty easily. And then from there, they got DJ, Damien, and Mrs. Jules. She was the oldest one. Eventually, they figured out who everybody really was. They had some difficulty deciding which Eric was which, and actually, they are still not absolutely sure. Everybody just decided to keep his own name. The children didn't like them, but it made things much easier. Mac and Nancy kept their new names, but when they were together, they still called each other, Hey You, or just plain You. Chapter 29, Stephen. Stephen had green hair. He had purple ears and a blue face. He wore his sister's pink dancing shoes and green leotards. The leotards matched his hair. He was all dressed up as a goblin for Mrs. Jules' Halloween party. But unfortunately, it wasn't Halloween. Haha, you sure look stupid, said Jason. Jason was Stephen's best friend. So do you, said Stephen. Boy, are you dumb, said Jenny. Halloween is on Sunday. Today is only Friday. You're the one who's dumb, said Stephen. Haha, you'd probably come to school on Sunday. Mrs. Jules said we'd have a party today. But none of the other children wore costumes, only Stephen. All right, class, said Mrs. Jules. It's time for our Halloween party. See, said Stephen. Mrs. Jules gave each child a cookie that looked like an orange witch with a black hat. She laughed when she saw Stephen and forgot to give him one. Stephen didn't ask for it. He was afraid that she'd laugh again. The children finished their cookies in less than 30 seconds. All right, class, said Mrs. Jules. The party is over. We have a lot of work to do. Stephen felt like a fool. The party lasted less than a minute, and he had to spend the rest of his day wearing his stupid goblin suit. Look, Stephen's wearing his sister's leotards, laughed Dana. They're green just like his hair, said Fatso. Everybody laughed. Mrs. Jules began an arithmetic lesson. She wrote on the blackboard, 2 plus 2 equals 5. That's wrong, Joy shouted. Mrs. Jules tries again. 2 plus 2 equals 3. That wasn't right either. All right, guys. Give me a second. There we go. Okay. I don't understand it, she said. They've always equaled 4 before. Suddenly, she screamed. The chalk turned into a squiggling worm. She dropped it on her foot. Then all the lights went out, and the blackboard lit up like a movie screen. A woman appeared on the screen. She had a long tongue and pointed ears. She stepped off the screen and into the classroom. It was the ghost of Mrs. Gorf. Mrs. Gorf ran her fingernails across the blackboard. Trick or treat, you rotten kids, she said. Now I'll get even with every last one of you. Where's Todd? Who is that? Asked Mrs. Jules. Mrs. Gorf, said Damien. Who's Mrs. Gorf? Asked Mrs. Jules. She was the meanest teacher we ever had, said Rondi. What happened to her? Louis ate her, said Jason. Well, I'm not going to allow this, said Mrs. Jules. Get out of my classroom, she demanded. It's Halloween, sweet teacher, said Mrs. Gorf. Ghosts can go anywhere they like. I've come for a little class reunion. Hold on, guys, I'm going to stop a second so I can plug my iPad in so it doesn't die on us. There we go. But it isn't Halloween, said Mrs. Jules. Halloween is still 2 days away. I know, said Mrs. Gorf, but Halloween falls on a Sunday this year, so we are celebrating it on the Friday before. Stephen leaped up from his seat. See, I was right, he said. Today is the day we celebrate it, the Friday before. Mrs. Gorf proved it. He ran up to Mrs. Gorf. They all laughed at me and made me feel stupid because I was the only one who got dressed up. But they were the ones who were wrong. You and I are right. He put his arms around Mrs. Gorf and hugged her. Mrs. Gorf gasped and disappeared. The lights came back on. Mrs. Jules picked up the piece of chalk from the floor. She wrote on the blackboard, 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's good, she said. When 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4, anything can happen. All the children who had laughed at Stephen now called him a hero, but they told him to change out of his stupid costume. So at lunch, Stephen went home, washed up, and changed. He came back wearing blue jeans and a polo shirt. Of course, his hair was still green. It always was. Last chapter. Chapter 30. Louis. Louis had a red face and a mustache of many colors. He was the art teacher at Wayside School. It was his job to see that the children didn't have too much fun during lunch and recess. And if you haven't already guessed, he is the one who wrote this book. On June 10th, there was a blizzard. Louis was afraid that the children would have too much fun, so nobody was allowed outside. Class, said Mrs. Jules, after you finish your lunch today, come back up to the classroom. You are not allowed outside. The children all went to the lunchroom. Miss Mush had made tuna surprise. They looked at it and then hurried back up the stairs. There was nothing to do. Now, class, said Mrs. Jules, I know you're all bored, but I have a special surprise for you. I hope it's better than tuna surprise, said Mauricia. Mrs. Jules continued, Louis is going to come up and entertain us. He will tell us a story. Now I want you all to be on your best behavior. When Louis walked in, all the children booed. Are you going to tell us a story? Asked Bibi. Yes, said Louis. Well, it better be good, Bibi warned. It better be better than the tuna surprise, said Butterfingers. I thought the tuna surprise was good, said Louis. You'd eat dirt if they put enough ketchup on it, said Mac. Hey, everybody be quiet, said Todd. Let him tell the story. Not too loud, Louis, said Sherry. I'm trying to get some sleep. Louis began his story. This is a story about a school very much like this one. But before we get started, there is something you want to know so that you don't get confused. In this school, every classroom is on the same story. Which one? The 18th? Asked Jenny. No, said Louis. They are all on the ground. The school is only 1 story high. Not much of a school, laughed Damien. Louis continued. Now, you might think the children there are strange and silly. That is probably true. However, when I told them stories about you, they thought that you were strange and silly. Us? The children answered. How are we strange? I'm normal, said Stephen. Aren't I? As normal as I am, Joe assured him. The children at that school must be crazy, said Leslie. Real Lulus, Mauricia agreed. Tell us about them, Louis, Bibi demanded. For one thing, Louis said, none of these children have ever been turned into an apple. That's silly, said Dee Dee. Everybody's been turned into an apple. It's part of growing up. Louis continued. Dead rats don't walk into classrooms wearing raincoats. What do they wear, tuxedos? Said Todd. And girls never try to sell their toes, Louis added. Well, no wonder, said Leslie, at today's prices. Louis continued. They don't trade names or read upside down. They can't turn mosquito bites into numbers. They don't count the hairs on their heads. The walls don't laugh. And 2 plus 2 always equals 4. How horrible, said Damien. That's not the worst of it, said Louis. They've never tasted Mauricia-flavored ice cream. A hush fell over the classroom. Mrs. Jules, I'm scared, said Allison. Is there really a school like that? Of course not, said Mrs. Jules. Louis was just telling a story. It was a good story, said Leslie. I thought it was stupid, said Kathy. I liked it, said Rondi. It was funny, Mrs. Jules said. Louis, it was a very entertaining story, but we don't really go into fairy tales here. I'm trying to teach my class the truth. That's all right, said Louis. I have to go down to room 29 now and tell them a story. He started out the door. Class, said Mrs. Jules, let's all thank Louis for his wonderful story. Everybody booed. The end. Okay. Well, the good news is tomorrow we're going to start the next one. The story continues with Wayside School is Falling Down. So we'll read that one tomorrow. Okay, now that we got extra long reading time, you need to get your binders and open your binders to the blue ELA tab, our blue reading tab. And turn